Welcome to the Talk That Talk podcast with the Big Boy Conversation with your host, Aaron Sims here at SMG. Hey man, we got a big show here for you tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about them Cavs, but mostly, we're going to dedicate this show to the late, great Jim Brown. We're going to put him up in the Rafters. This is my father's favorite running back of all times. The reason my son wore 32 down at Canton South, and my favorite running back of all times. Let's get ready to talk that talk. Yeah, we coming here live to you today on a Friday night, waiting on the Cavs to play the Spurs here tonight at 8 o'clock. Yeah, I'm happy about the Cavs, man. I watched their last game. They went up against the Knicks. The Knicks was a team that I was worried about. Of course, they didn't have Bronson and a couple other players. I think they were 4 rotation players out. But the Cavs showed that, that they could come from the behind and take charge and win big. And that's what, that I like about these young Cavs. I think they got a good chance of making a full run. They're only 3 games away from securing home field advantage. The magic number is 3. And once they secure that, Boston will be number 2 and they'll be number 1 for sure in the East. They've already won their division. They've already clinched the playoffs. Let's go ahead and get these 3 wins in these last 6 games and go ahead and make it happen. Now, the next thing I'm gonna talk about is a player that's near and dear to my heart. I had the privilege to be there at the memorial for the Jim Brown. I was there with some great people. I was there with Unique Brown, Christy Acuity, and Pete Baker. Good people, man. I used to do the podcast down there at TMDE Sports with my brother Marcus Donald. Big shout out to you, brother. Thank you for getting me into the podcast field, and especially with these Cleveland Browns. But today, we are going to put up in the Rafters Jim Brown. I'm telling you, man, he was everything. And, pretty much before I get to talking about him, I'm going to play a little bit of highlights about him because Jim Brown, the legend, he was one of the best of all times.
When it was time to play, I was there.
Without question, the most impressive player I've seen with Jim Brown. Just such a durable, fast, powerful.
This Jimmy Brown just sticks his head down and powers straight forward.
Brown staggers, keeps on his feet.
He bites away. Jim is to midfield.
Jimmy's harder to bring down than a wild steer. There are defensive men in the league who have dedicated themselves, their souls and their bodies, to a holy war against Jimmy Brown. None of them has yet won the crusade.
John Stedman, I guess he'll go down as one of the great all-time running backs in professional football.
I mean, how better can you write a script for crying out loud?
Jim Brown in the Rafters. The big thing I noticed about Jim Brown, man, he had the respect of everyone, whether it be the coaches, whether it be, the brothers in the streets, whether it be scholars or actors or football players, anything. He had to respect everywhere he went. He carried himself with a certain, kind of dignity, that most men don't have, especially back in them days. It was hard to have. I look at Jim Brown as far as a football player. He was one of the toughest football players, in the history. I mean, he never missed a game. He had incredible balance. He had speed. He had size. And that's what made him one of the best. And when I think about it, I think about some of his runs and some of his different things. But I watched a tribute to Jim Brown, and they talked about the 5 greatest plays in the history of Jim Brown. And I want to check those out, the 5 greatest plays of Jim Brown.
Picking out Jim Brown's greatest plays is a nearly impossible task. The running back rushed for over 12,000 yards and scored over 120 touchdowns in his 9 years. His incredible speed, balance, and power separated him from the rest. Here's a look at 5 of Brown's greatest plays. In 1958, a season that Jim Brown averaged an astounding 127 yards per game, he hit the hole in Pittsburgh for this 59-yard score, which helped the Browns defeat the Steelers 49-12. Later in the same season, Brown ran for this 58-yard score against the Giants, adding to his career-high 17-touchdown season. 1963, Brown picked up his career-long 80-yard rush for a touchdown against the Redskins. In this year, Brown rushed for 1,863 yards, a career high. Not only did Brown collect his longest career rushing touchdown that day, he also grabbed his longest career receiving touchdown. He caught this 83-yard pass from quarterback Frank Ryan to help beat the Washington Redskins 37-14. And for what is arguably Brown's greatest play, he caught this pass from quarterback Milt Plum in 1961 and ran 77 yards for a touchdown.
Jim Brown, turning to the 40, 45, 50. Jim Brown down the sideline. Jim Brown is going for the score.
The reception was the longest for the season for the Browns and a perfect illustration of the power and finesse that Jim Brown brought to the game of football.
Jim Brown in the Rafters. You know, it was always a lot of things going around, a lot of stories going around about Jim Brown. And one of my favorite stories was from one of my favorite comedians. Richard Pryor. He told a story of what you gonna do. It was a story of a friend who was there for another friend in the time of need. I would tell the story, but I think Richard can do it a little better. What you gonna do?
Then finally, my old lady called Jim Brown up. She said, Jim gonna come over and tell you, fuck Jim Brown. I'll show Jim Brown. I'm the man. I don't give a fuck. Nobody afraid of Jim Brown here. And Jim was coming in the driveway. I got all nervous. Boom, jingling. Where's it? Jim Brown. Oh, shit. Let me get this motherfucker ain't gonna scare me. Let me get my pipe. Pipe said, come on, Rich. Me and you will show Jim. Don't worry about it. Shit, Jim, don't scare nobody. That's right, Rich. Jim come in the room. I started smoking. Hey, Jim. How you doing, bro? And Jim had psychology. Jim go, wanna go roller skating? Pipe. Maybe you wanna go for a ride? Jim say, what you gonna do? So, what do you mean? What you gonna do about that shit? What? I'm doing what I want to do. You know, I ain't afraid of you, you know. You ain't no movie star to me. I ain't scared of you, motherfucker. I'm your friend. What you gonna do? You gonna get well, or you gonna end our friendship? What you gonna do? The pipe said, don't listen. He trying to fuck with you, Rich. Jim, I am a man. There ain't no doubt about that. But what you gonna do? And Jim kept saying that to me all through the hall. What you gonna do? Leave me the fuck alone. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm getting the fuck away from you so I don't have to hear what you gonna do. Cause I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do. Now leave me the fuck alone. What you gonna do? So Jim almost got me to the hospital. But he had to go somewhere, like to home to eat. And I was in the room with the pipe. And the pipe said,
Richard Pryor and Jim Brown. What you gonna do? Yeah. You know, that just shows, how Jim Brown was a very caring person. He cared about the community. He cared about his friends. Enough to come over and asked him, what you gonna do? You know, when I think of that, I think about the gang war that was in L.A. that still goes on, you know, around places I don't know much about it. But he had a peace between the Bloods and the Crips. And I remember one of the things at the memorial, Rock came and spoke, and he talked about it. But it was big. I mean, you're more than a football player when you can go into the hood and tell two of the biggest gangs cease fire because your respect, you know, respect is in the air and everybody got to grabbing it. So I'm gonna go back in time a little bit, back to, you know, when the Bloods and Crips was doing their thing, and then Jim Brown's came in with the American program. You know, here's a story about Jim Brown and the effect he had on the Bloods and Crips and Rock.
They've had it with black-on-black violence, they say. Mark Watts joins us from the newsroom with more on that story. Mark?
Well, Jerry, we've heard talk of gang truces before, and for the most part, that is all it has ever been, talk. But tonight, talk and action spawned by one of the few men who have been able to get through to gang members since they've been killing each other on the streets of the Southland.
Rising above the ashes from the riots of 1992 is a covenant that could forever change the face of Los Angeles. The devastation and death toll have apparently convinced the city's two notorious gangs they should stop killing each other.
People don't lost brothers, mothers, sisters, daughters, sons, everything over this, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's time for our people to come together. I'm a Blood, and I love my Bloods, I love my homies. You know what I'm saying? These is Crips, they black. You know what I'm saying? It's time to come as one.
Across the city, we have different elements that have been working continually to bring about peace.
It is a truce that has apparently been orchestrated by Hall of Fame running back turned community activist Jim Brown. For years, he's been teaching Crips and Bloods self-esteem and economic empowerment through a program called American.
We teach our skills, life management skills, and it's the kind of education which allows them to negotiate better, to put it into a forum where individuals can communicate and come together.
Because as black people, we need to check ourselves first before we wreck ourselves.
After 2 decades of war and nearly 10,000 gang homicides, it would certainly be an historic settlement known in the hood as tying rags.
And I'm happy to see that we all gonna come together. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody gonna be killing each other over the punk ass color again.
We ain't tying no rag. They blue, we red.
We all feuding with each other, and then all of a sudden y'all want to get together. For me, really, I ain't with it.
And others are skeptical as well.
That would be the ideal situation if they were to call it off. Of course, the downside of that was if they refocused their efforts on the police.
Lieutenant John Duncan fears the gang rivalry could be put aside only to focus anger on police. Police received a handwritten flyer that illustrates that concern. And in some areas of the city, the fears could be warranted.
We ain't going for no harassment, put on the car, put on the ground. We ain't going for it. We gonna do what we got to do.
But tonight at Jim Brown's Hollywood Hills home, where the truce is being drawn up, there was no mention of targeting police. It is a first-of-its-kind peace treaty between Crips and Bloods to lay down their arms.
These young men are going to be the catalyst for a better country.
It might be a little peace. Maybe not for long, though, you know, but it's going to be a little peace.
It almost sounds too good to be true, but Jim Brown says, yes, indeed, the treaty is authentic, and it is being patterned after an Israeli-Egyptian peace settlement drawn up during the Camp David peace accords, even complete with guidelines to follow if the treaty is broken. Jerry, Tommy.
Jim Brown and the Rafters. You know, it's big when you can affect the whole community like that. You know, not too many athletes can do it. All I can say is homage. That's all I can say is homage. And as we go on to a little bit more, I want to go into remembering Jim Brown. It's a tribute to Jim Brown that was made.
There's no stopping Jim Brown on an effort like this. He goes over the top and into the end zone for his 5th touchdown of the day.
Have you ever seen an image of strength like this? A picture of power like this. A portrait of courage, like this. Ask yourself these questions, because the answers tell you how superhuman this man really was. Ask yourself these questions, because his whole life, that's what Jim Brown was about.
We cannot make exception to these laws just because a person happens to be black or white.
Forcing the world to ask why things were the way they were, and how the rest of us could force change.
This is Jim Brown.
We have power. You ain't see nobody knocking, man. Look at the film. You don't see nobody knocking back.
Most devastating ball carrier in the history of football.
He was born in the South, St. Simon's Island off the coast of Georgia in 1936, and raised in the North, a small town on Long Island, where his legend as an athlete began. Any sport Jim Brown played, he dominated. From football to basketball, to track to lacrosse. Even though there's little video of him playing that last one, there were those who said there's never been a better lacrosse player who walked the earth. But football was the game that lifted him to stardom. First at Syracuse University, where he was an All-American, and then in Cleveland with the Browns. His NFL career began in 1957, and he played in the league for 9 years, absolutely dominating the sport and rewriting the record book, setting a new standard for how a running back could rule the game with a combination of speed, force, and will. But Jim Brown was so much more than arguably the greatest football player of all time. That was clear when he retired before he turned 30 to become a new kind of pioneer. A black action star in the movies. A Hollywood leading man who refused to be cornered into how the world cast him. And that was just the start of the legacy he built outside the football field. During the Civil Rights Movement, he was front and center in the fight to earn blacks economic opportunities. And in 1967, he organized the famed Cleveland Summit to support Muhammad Ali and his refusal to serve in Vietnam. Then, in the 1980s, he founded the American program to provide outreach to gang members and kids in juvenile detention facilities to give them education, hope, and a chance when no one else would.
We have changed many, many lives, and as I stand here right now, our people can carry out the work. They don't need me, and when I leave here, they can still carry out the work and they don't need me.
Even if he sometimes looked like Superman, Jim Brown wasn't a perfect man, but he was one of the most important figures ever to make a mark on the landscape of sports and society. He changed the game of football with his play. He redefined the limits of what a black man could be in America through his strength, his power, and his courage. He never stopped looking for ways to make the country better for those of us who followed in his footsteps. Rest in power, Jim Brown. We'll keep doing the work in your name.
Rest in power, Jim Brown, in the Rafters. Yeah, we can come up with our next segment with Aaron Jr., Word of the Day. But before that, I'm going to leave you with a little laugh, and it just kind of shows you who Jim Brown was, you know, as a man. You know, first I want you to hear from Mike Tyson. He's going to talk about, you know, how tough Jim Brown is. Then you're going to hear a story from Bill Bellamy, you know, what happened on the set when the Hollywood film. Jim Brown was like 67 years old. He still was calling people out. Here we go.
But listen, y'all guys really don't know how badass Jim Brown when he was young. Jim Brown was an ass-kicking motherfucker back then. Yeah. Yeah.
This before football?
No, this is during football.
During football, okay.
Yeah, and after football, too.
He wasn't playing.
Yeah, he would smack you. He was just interesting.
So, Cass is talking about, man, ain't shit on the, ain't nothing on the fucking top, bro. You don't know nothing to you. We run this shit, bro. No. Florida run this shit, man. We talking about, man, come on, Florida State, baby. They going in about schools and who was the best and da-da-da, SEC, this, that, and the other, right? Jim Brown, man, fuck all them goddamn teams, man. When nobody coming through me. When nobody coming through me. I run through all of you little young motherfuckers right here. So fuck y'all talking about he did his arm like this. And my man picked Jim Brown up in the air, over his head, and body slammed Jim Brown in front of everybody. I was like, oh shit, everybody's like, dog, what you do that for that Jim Brown? Jim Brown said, God damn, I was just fucking with y'all, man. His flip flop, one flip flop was over there, his kufi was over there. He was like, God damn, man, you can't even play with motherfuckers no more.
Jim Brown in the Rafters. All right, we're about to head on to our next segment, the Word of the Day by Aaron Jr. Peace. Welcome back to our podcast, Talk That Talk. And now comes the time of the day where I bring Aaron Jr. in to give us the Word of the Day. And I hear the Word of the Day is on forgiveness.
Yeah, the word of the day is forgiveness. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you."
All right.
And Luke 9:23 says, "Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." So taking up your cross daily and putting death to your flesh is choosing not to get angry when someone insults you or says something bad about you or just anything else that makes you angry.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about loving and forgiving others like Christ forgave us on the cross.
Right. You know, when I hear picking up your cross, I think about it. You know, they didn't love Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So you can expect them, you know, to love you because their demons can't tell the difference between you and Christ because Christ abides in you and you abide in Christ. So the demons only feel Christ and they didn't love Christ. So, you know, when you pick up the cross, you pick up those things. You know, sometimes people just don't like you for no reason.
Yeah.
They don't even know why. Because your energy doesn't match their energy. You see what I mean? So that's picking up your cross. And as far as forgiveness goes, you know, the whole thing about forgiveness is like when Christ was beaten the way he was and everything happened and he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." Mm-hmm. You almost got to say, maybe they just don't know not what they do. Maybe they've been told something by somebody else. Maybe they misunderstood the way you present yourself. They misunderstood what you were trying to do or what you were trying to be. So it's almost like you got to forgive them because they know not what they do type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you really do it for yourself. You know what I mean? So you don't carry that burden around and you don't think about revenge because God said, "Vengeance is mine," said under the Lord. You know, you don't go take revenge on people. You let life handle it. You know what I mean? Because if you trust God, like Muhammad Ali said, God is my bodyguard. Mm-hmm. You know? Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, when you forgive others, it actually is freedom to you. And when you have unforgiveness towards others, I heard someone say it actually affects only you because you feel that rejection and pain and hurt by that person, but they don't feel it.
Right. They don't feel it because they don't care.
Yeah.
And the truth is, your subconscious doesn't know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. They think you're beating up yourself, so you internalize it. I always tell people hate is like cancer. It only kills the host.
Yeah.
So, you know, with that being said, what advice would you have for the young athlete, a young high school person who's going through that? What would be your advice?
Jesus says, "Love and forgive as I've loved and forgave you" on the cross. Always keep the cross on your mind. Think of the cross daily. Just keep Christ on your mind and you will remember and remind yourself to love and forgive that person and have compassion towards others.
Right. Because it gets no more serious than the cross. Mm-hmm. I mean, regardless of what they did to you, they didn't do what they did to Jesus.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, we're going to go to DJ Chose, and we're going to play some highlights of the late, great Jim Brown. Jim Brown up in the Rafters. I thank you, my son, for coming in with that word of the day. I appreciate you. And here we go with DJ Chose. No hard feelings. I'm one of God's children. 1, 2, 1, 2.
DJ Chose over there? Look like DJ
Yeah. Shook back, I'm on my feet, I'm shining. Used to pick up, now I'm called declining. No hard feelings, just on different timing. If I accidentally said I miss you, I was fucking lying. Hey, focus on myself, I'm eating clean, I'm drinking lots of water. Waking up at 7, hitting the gym, I swear I'm going hard. Supposed to pick my phone, boom, I promise I don't wanna be bothered. People using me, I cut them out, became a problem solver. I don't know what's going on, but bitch, I'm feeling good. And bitch, I'm looking better. Must've thought I never killed her. Yeah, down they hit me up, so fuck them hoes fell. Cause bitch, I'm feeling good, and bitch, I'm looking better, yeah. Ooh, ain't no hard feelings. Yeah, I'm one of God's children. Ain't no hard feelings. I'm one of God's children. Broke the motion, all I'm on. They slept on me and got it wrong. Took from me and left me alone. They broke my heart, but I got it fixed. Expensive sis on my cologne. Left on you, my alpha moans. Search for me is not no clone. Too late for us.